First of all, big shout to Nachi and Shana Gordon. Shkayach for sponsoring the breakfast and learning this morning. Zech Nishmas Chaim Moshe ben Binyamin Tzvi, Rosh and Aliyah, and with that, all Sheva Bracha and Atzlacha should come to you, the whole Mishpacha, all Klal Yisrael. Okay, so last week we began taking a little bit of a break from Sefer Yeshua. Bez Hashem, we'll get back to it after Shovavim to discussing of Shovavim. So, but we did it. We started talking about it in a little bit of a more expanded way. So the sugya that we started last week is the sugya of the Eiruv Rav, to really appreciate the inyan of Mitzrayim, of Golus Mitzrayim, Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is what the weeks of Shovavim are running through. And the Arizal revealed to us that it's because we're reading and learning about Golus Mitzrayim and Golus Mitzrayim, that's why Shovavim has this koach of tshuva, of Tikkun HaBris. So in order to appreciate what Golus Mitzrayim was about and what Golus Mitzrayim is about, we have to learn about the Eiruv Rav. That's what we had last week. Now, last week were really the questions, the discussion really was revolving around who the Eiruv Rav were, the Pashtas, the Derech HaPshat. It's simple. Who were these people of the Eiruv Rav? And what we saw last week was that Derech HaPshat, it's Machlokes and Chazal. We're just going to sum up for a couple minutes, and then we'll move on to the next step. So what we saw is that it was Machlokes and Chazal. The Mechilta, Rashi quotes that. Rashi and the Mechilta are of the opinion that the Eiruv Rav were a multitude of many nations that, for whatever reason, found themselves in Mitzrayim. We're talking about millions and millions of people, a huge number of people, and they, for whatever reason, felt this affinity and this connection with Klal Yisrael. And that's the Eiruv Rav, and really we saw that's really what Pyre was threatened by. He wasn't threatened by the Yidden, he hated the Yidden, but he wasn't threatened by the Yidden. He was threatened by the Am B'nai Yisrael, this multitude, these millions of people that found themselves within Mitzrayim. And the reason why he placed the Avdos on the Jewish people was really not so much because he was afraid of them. If he wanted, he could have, that wasn't his issue. His issue was, if I make them a low-class people, then hopefully the Eiruv Rav won't feel they won't feel this desire to associate with Klal Yisrael. So that was one opinion. The Eiruv Rav are, again, millions of people, foreigners that somehow find themselves in Mitzrayim and feel this connection with Klal Yisrael. That was the Mechilta. Then we saw from the Zohar Kaddish, the Zohar has a different opinion, that the Eiruv Rav was not these millions of people, a multitude of foreigners in Mitzrayim. Rather, the Eiruv Rav were the upper class, top echelon sorcerers of Mitzrayim, the Chartumei Mitzrayim, the ones that in the beginning are opposing Moshe Rabbeinu, the ones that in the beginning are trying to disprove all the Malkus as being just witchcraft. They were the Eiruv Rav, and that was the huge catch that Moshe Rabbeinu was thinking of. That we're talking about Mamish, the high society of Mitzrayim, and they wanted to become part of Klal Yisrael, and that's what the Eiruv Rav were. That's what we saw. Okay, that's Machlokes and Chazal. And then the last thing that we saw also, and this really was the question we left off with, is that in terms of Moshe Rabbeinu's thinking of to take the Eiruv Rav with us when we left Mitzrayim, there seems to be a little bit mixed messages in terms of what the Rebbe Shalom wanted. Do we want the Eiruv Rav? Do we not want the Eiruv Rav? On the one hand, the Zohar and the Medrash both recorded the same conversation, which is Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Rebbe Shalom, the Eiruv Rav want to join, so we should be makar of them. And the Rebbe Shalom says, not a good idea. I see where these things are headed. It's not a good idea. And Moshe says, no, I think it is a good idea. So Rebbe Shalom says, fine, you take them, but it's your responsibility. That's basically the conversation, which seems, again, which opens up a lot of questions, like why Moshe Rabbeinu is fighting with Rebbe Shalom about this. If Hashem says no, it's no. Okay. But the other question is, a more important question is, if the Rebbe Shalom was clearly saying no, yet on the other hand, and we saw also from the Arizal that Moshe Rabbeinu went out of his way to rearrange the order of the mitzvahs of Pesach, that he gave over Pesach night, by a few days before Pesach, before Makkos Becharos, he rearranged the order in order to be Makar, to be Mechazik the Eiruv Rav. So you have this inyan. The Rebbe Shalom seems to be very disinterested in the Eiruv Rav, and it's Moshe Rabbeinu's inyan that he wants to be Makar of them. Yet mitzad sheni, we saw that the entire purpose of the Makkos was really in order to convince Parai to let the Eiruv Rav out. Because in terms of convincing Parai to let Yidden out, he wasn't interested in having Yidden in his country to begin with. What he was threatened by and what he was disturbed by is allowing the Eiruv Rav to go, whether they be the millions of people or the top echelon. Those were the ones that he didn't want to let out. And the Makkos were really there to force Paro's hand, not just to let Klal Yisrael out, but to let the Eiruv Rav out. Now that seems to indicate the Rebbeinu Shem was interested in the Eiruv Rav. So which one is it? It's very confusing. That's what we saw. That's sort of how we ended off last week. Who the Eiruv Rav were, machlokes, and mixed messages, whether we want them, whether we don't want them. Okay. So now we're going to go to the next part of the discussion, which is to answer the question of who were the Eiruv Rav, but not the Derech Pshat. In terms of the neshamas, in Pnimius, who the Eiruv Rav were. What are these souls? The souls of the Eiruv Rav. Where are they coming from? What's their inyan? Why are they so important? Why is there mixed messages about this? And we'll see in this way of really going into the history of the souls of the Eiruv Rav, we'll then be able to, hopefully, with Hashem, show how the Medrash and the Zohar are really, they go together. It's not really a machlokes. That's always the way it works. In Pshat, it's machlokes. In Pnimius, what initially looks like a machlokes, they really complement each other. So, as Hashem will see. I'm not sure whether we'll be able to get through everything today. This might be, next week we might have to sort of further develop the spiritual history of the Eiruv Rav. That's what we're talking about right now. Last week was the physical history of the Eiruv Rav, who they were. Now it's the spiritual history of the Eiruv Rav. Okay, but as Hashem, again, you'll bear with me. These are very, very important sugyas that open up mamish, Yiddishkeit and Jewish history, b'chlal, mamish. But like everything else, everything that's deep and big and Yiddishkeit altering, you have to go slow. You can't. You want to rush things because it's big ideas. I'll tell you the truth. Last night when I was sitting down, figuring out what to say, I really was going back and forth whether to talk about this or not, because I know that it could be confusing to some people and it might throw a person for a loop. So I was really hesitant. On the other hand, I'm naive and I just want to share. Torah. So if this discussion throws anyone, then like I usually then forget it and move on, and that's it. But I think with time, what initially starts off as like a shocking concept and ideas that throw you, with time, it's like everything is, we get used to things, right? So it's just a matter of like allowing the concept to sort of settle and it'll find the right place in your head. Okay. But I'm going to try to do the best I can to say what I need to say and not say things that might confuse. So if there's any questions that people have, some of the questions I'll be able to answer, some I won't be able to answer because, sometimes when you answer a question, you have to know what the next question is, right? So sometimes I have to say, I'm not answering that question because I know the next question after that I'm not going to be able to answer, right? So I will do the best we can. Okay, so it's like this. To really appreciate the history of the Eiruv Rav, the Arizal, in a number of places, again, it's a major discussion in his writings, and in order to get to the answer of who the Eiruv Rav were, spiritually speaking, we have to go back a second and to really ask a much broader question, which is, and the Arizal does ask this: what exactly was the purpose of Galus Mitzrayim? Like when you just read Chumash, it's out of nowhere. I mean, usually every exile that we've experienced was because of Eretz. We did something wrong, as Rebbeinu Shem punishes us by kicking us out of Eretz Yisrael or whatever. It's a punishment. It's an einish for something. Mitzrayim is mamish out of nowhere. It doesn't seem to be for any particular reason, even though historically, I mean, the way the story plays out, it's because of the sale of Yosef Atzadik, right? That's why he ends up in Egypt, and the whole thing continues. But we know that Avram Avinu already was told by the Rebbeinu Shalom, by the Bris Bein Absarim, that your children are going to be enslaved in a foreign country, which ended up being Mitzrayim. So even before there was a Havamina of Yosef Atzadik and selling Yosef Atzadik, there's already a decree of Galus Mitzrayim like that. What's the Indian over there? What was the purpose of that Galus Aleph? Why was it in such a way of slavery? Because we didn't have such a Galus we haven't had since then, Baruch Hashem, in such a way. We've been in foreign territory, we've been attacked in other ways, but slavery is unique, okay? And why Dafka Mitzrayim? Why that place in particular? So these are the broad questions. Okay, now, the way the Arizal goes about answering this is that he goes all the way back. You have to go all the way back. When Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it was cataclysmic, okay? Two major problems took place, okay? Now we're going to be talking about the second one. The first problem that happened as a result of the Chet of the Eitz Hadas is that everything just went down. Everything went down. I mean, what life was, where Adam and Chava were living, the mindset, the big madregas, shrunken. Everything shrunken. The Chazal even say such a thing, that Adam and Chava before the sin were so tall that they towered over the sun. And as a result of the sin, Chazal say Hashem took his hand and just squashed Adam and Chava to be human-sized. Obviously, it doesn't mean physical, but it means on a spiritual level. It means they were huge people, and all of a sudden, tiny. So we go through that sometimes in our own lives, having moments of bigness, and then you shrink down. So that was a huge yerida. That's why we're not talking about right now. The other effect that happened with the Chet Eitzadas is the mixture of Tov and Ra. The mixture of Tov and Ra. Not only were Adam and Chava on a high level, but it was absolutely clear what Kedusha was and what Tumah was. Gan Eden was holy, and there was a place of the Nachash. As a result of the Chet Eitzadas, by them listening to the Nachash and inviting the Nachash into their world of Gan Eden, that caused a bilbul, that caused a mixture of Tov and Ra on all levels, and that causes confusion, you name it. And the fact that anyone has a question in life and they're confused about what the right thing is, it's as a result of that mixture of good and evil. Now, particularly though, the mixture of good and evil, the specific aspect of that reality, that phenomenon of the mixture of good and evil, what we're going to be talking about is as follows. Nishmas Yisrael, the souls of the Jewish people, there's also two categories. There's the souls of the Jewish people, there's Knesset Yisrael, and the Jewish people, the Nishmas Yisrael, the souls of the Jewish people, predate any particular person that we know is Jewish, right? The Gemara, the Pasuk says Bereshis, that Hashem created the world in the beginning, right? Rashi says B'shvil Yisrael Shnei Bereshis, that Hashem created the world because of Yisrael. Yisrael doesn't exist yet. Nishmas Yisrael exists. Adam and Chava were Nishmas Yisrael. They were the sum total of the entirety of the Jewish people were in Adam and Chava. Okay? And then you had another category, the souls of the nations of the world. You have Gan Eden and Nachash. You have Nishmas Yisrael and the nations of the world. As a result of the Chet, not only are things shrunken down, that's for sure, but that's not the discussion right now. As a result of the Chet, Nishmas Yisrael became polluted and became mixed up with klipa, with unholiness, with impurity. Everything becomes mixed up, Tov and Ra, everything, including Nishmas Yisrael. Okay? Now, therefore, going forward after Adam and Chava's sin, part of the major avodah of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, of the ones that are trying to establish Am Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael in the world, is that they're not only trying to be mechanech their children properly and make sure Klal Yisrael are unique and separate and have emunah, and they're not just trying to be Makar of the world. On a deep spiritual level, what the avodah, what the Avos HaKadosh were trying to do, what they were charged with doing, is to sift through all the neshamas of humanity and to somehow, on a spiritual level, isolate Nishmas Yisrael and to unify Nishmas Yisrael from being spread and mixed up among all the nations of the world, and to unify them and bring them into their own jurisdiction. In other words, to try to go back to what it was Kaid Machet in terms of there being two different purified universes: purebred Nishmas Yisrael and purebred not Nishmas Yisrael. And because in order to have Klal Yisrael, you need to be able to sift through that process. That's the avoid of the Avos. That's Aleph. Days. The Rizal says the following idea. This is the part that's a little bit tricky. The Rizal says that every neshama really is comprised of two parts. Now, in the terminology of the Rizal, for our purposes, we'll call it the following term. There's the body of the neshama and the head of the neshama. Now, obviously, physically speaking, your body, the head and the body are disconnected. It's a big problem, right? So it doesn't really work. But spiritually speaking, there is a part of the neshama which is called the body. There's a part of the neshama which is called the head. Each one can exist on its own. But obviously, the healthy thing is for them to be unified. And as the terminology indicates, the body is gevaldik, but the head is the much higher madreg. Both parts of Nishmas Yisrael, the bodies of Nishmas Yisrael and the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, became polluted and mixed up as a result of the Chet Eitzadas. But the Rizal explains that the process and the action that Adam and Chava took in order to create that mixture was different in terms of the body of the neshama and the head of the neshama. According to the Rizal, in Chumash, when you read about the sin, it's all about listening to the snake and eating from the tree. That's really what it is. It's very Tu B'Shvat. But in the Kisvei Ari, the inyan of eating from the tree is really part of a much bigger avera that Adam and Chava committed, which is really the essence of the sin, which is Adam and Chava living together before Shabbos. That's really what the issue was. That's really what the issue was. Because we see this in Chazal, that eating is very often a synonymous, or a lashon nakiya, a nice way of talking about intimacy between a husband and wife. Achlo machata piyu, there's different terminologies in Tanakh and Chazal. That's how sometimes Chazal talk. So of course Adam and Chava ate from the tree. We're not taking away the image that you have from the time that you're in second grade. That's still true. But it's part of a much broader inyan, which is Adam and Chava living together. Because we know, like, for example, you also remember from the time that you're a kid, maybe you didn't realize it when you were a kid, what was being told to you. But Rashi brings down from Chazal that one of the reasons why the Nachash, like, what's the Nachash getting involved? What's his issue with Adam and Chava? Because he saw Adam and Chava living together, and he was Nisava, he was jealous of that, so he wants to share Shalom Bayis. And the pnimistic level means that the living together of Adam and Chava before Shabbos, which is not the way the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted it to be, it's on some level of Bechina Pagama Bris. It's on some level of Bechina Pagama Bris. Obviously, it was Bekdusha of Tahar, Adam and Chava, but on their level, the Rebbeinu Shalom expected from them, not Shabbos, is ready Pagama Bris. And therefore, on some level, that already was the Chayt. And the Rizal says, that inyan of Adam and Chava living together before Shabbos, that's what caused the mixture of good and evil in terms of the body of the Jewish souls. So the body of the Jewish souls became mixed up, and they were nifgam, they were damaged by Adam and Chava living together. What about the heads of the Jewish soul? When was that affected? And the reason for that is, by the way, when a husband and wife live together, and especially Adam and Chava, it's in order to produce neshamas. So when we're talking about neshamas becoming damaged by Adam and Chava, it's always going to be related to the inyane bris, an inyane ishus aspect of the Aveira. When you're eating, you're not bringing down new neshamas, right? But a husband and wife is bringing down neshamas. So the Aveira that's going to cause damage to Nishmas Yisrael, both body and head, is going to be Aveiras that are in Adam and Chava's universe that are related to Ishus, you understand? So when Adam and Chava live with each other in Gan Eden, but not in the right way, which was a Pagam Habris on their level, again, we're talking about Adam and Chava, you understand? So that causes damage, that causes bilbul and irvav and mixtures in the bodies of the Jewish soul. The heads of the Jewish soul actually was not damaged yet. It was not brought down even yet. But the seeds were planted for damage. And the Rizal said that actual time when the heads of the Jewish souls were brought down and damaged by Adam and Chava was actually after the sin of Adam and Chava. Chazal tell us that after the chait of Adam and Chava wanted to do tshuva, and they separated from each other for 130 years. Kuf Lamed Shana, 130 years. Now, this is where you have to be very careful. We're talking about, tzaddikim, tzaddikim from 50 years ago, you have to be careful to talk about also, right? We're talking about Adam and Chava, we're talking about, there's not, you can't even say, but it's Lahagdut or Ladir, we have to learn, we have to know. Chazal say that during those 130 years when Adam and Chava were separated from each other, Adam, the Oinus, the Derech Oinus, had over 130 years an occasional experience of Pagam Habris. Okay? B'derech Oinus. B'derech Oinus, not willingly, Chas v'shalom. Now the Rizal taught that the Pagam Habris that Adam experienced over those 130 years was a residual effect of that Pagam Habris that was happened in Gan Eden with being with his wife before Shabbos. When he was with the Pagam Habris that took place in Gan Eden, that caused a bilbul, an irvav, a mixture, a damage to the bodies of the Jewish souls. The Pagam Habris that took place over the 130 years was bringing down and damaging at the same time the heads of the Jewish souls. So altogether, that is the full picture of the Pagam of Nishmas Yisrael that took place as a result of Adam and Chava. The body because what happened in Gan Eden, and the head because of which it all comes from what happened in Gan Eden, but the head because of what happened post Gan Eden. Take a look at Ma'ar Mokim number 1. This is from Shar Psukim in Parashat Shemos. It's just some, again, like I said, with time, Mashiach is going to come. We're going to have to know these inyanim, you understand? So we're just making achanas. V'ina he'inyan hu, said the Riyah Kaddish, the inyan is as follows. V'mashin is bar etzleinu. We've explained in other places, other times, Sheroiv haneshamas bais migufa, that most times neshamas are more connected. The average person walking around is more often than not just the body of their neshama, not really the head of their neshama. To be zeicha to the head of your neshama, that's already a big madrega. Most neshamas come from the body, v'loy min hadas atzmai, but not from the head itself, not from the das itself. Omnam hatipos hanizrokas adei shichva zer levatala, but said the Arizal. But when it comes to Adam and Chava, it was dafka because of the Pegam HaBris, the Eitzah zer levatala that he had b'aynis in those 130 years. That's what brought down not just the bodies of the neshama, but the heads of the neshama. Why? Because because again, this is because when it comes to the inyan, the pagam that took place during those 130 years, it was from the mind of Adam and Chava. That's how these things happen. It's not being motivated or awakened by anything external. It's from the own mind. And so Memela said the Riyah Kaddish, the neshamas, the parts of the neshama that's going to be brought down and damaged by that experience is dafka not the body of the neshama, it's going to be the mind of the neshama, the head of the neshama, because it's the head that's causing these problems during those 130 years. Okay. So he says, yeah.
Chav also just Adam. They were just said they both just Adam.
Adam. For this point, for our purposes right now.
And then also before Shabbos, they brought down the guf and was putting the guf.
Yes, to the yichud of Adam and Chava, right? The yichud of Adam and Chava before Shabbos that brought down the body and damaged it because it was before Shabbos. The pagam of Adam in those 130 years brought down the head and damaged it at the same time.
Chava was also with this with the.
It doesn't seem that way. We're going to see soon. It's more of an Adam Dike'inyan.
What did the eating of the tree actually damage, or is that something?
The tree can be seen at.
Or that's.
Okay, I'm not going to be able to answer that. Let's see. We can leave it at that. We'll see. Maybe next week.
First one.
Maybe, yeah, there you go. So maybe next week we'll talk about that. Let's see what he says. Nimsa. So it comes out. Kikol oisam haneshama shenivru ba'oisam kuf lamet shana. All the neshamas that were brought down, that were created, so to speak, during those 130 years, shepirish Adam Chava Kanaida, when Adam and Chava were separated, kulam neshamas el yoinis kedoshais v'chinas hadas. These were all holy, big neshamas, much bigger than the neshamas that were brought down during the times of Adam and Chava in Gan Eden before Shabbos, right? Or at least the parts of the neshama that was brought down then was much less than the parts of the neshama that's being brought down now. V'nisaru b'klipis. But again, just as the body was messed up because how it was brought to the world, so the heads was also messed up because of how it was brought to the world. Utzrichos gilgulim rabim, the tzarfam ulalavnam, and it's going to need a lot of inyanim, a lot of process to work through these neshamas and to sift through that Indian. Right? Remember, I said that the jobs of Avram Avinu and so on is to sift through the neshamas and to clarify, to fix the mistake of Adam and Chava. But now there's two tracks. There's the bodies of the neshamas that the others have to work with. And there's the heads of the neshamas that the others have to work with. And so what we're going to see in the Arizal is that these two parts of the neshama, the bodies of the neshama, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were able to work through and take care of on their own. It's 100% fine. And once Yaakov Avinu comes to the world, and the bodies of Nishmas Yisrael have been worked through from Avram Avinu, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Mitas Shleima, the bodies of Nishmas Yisrael are now purified and ready to go. But the problem was the heads of Nishmas Yisrael. The heads of Nishmas Yisrael took a lot more avodah to work it through. It wasn't just enough for there to be an Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in the world. We're going to see that's where you needed Galus Mitzrayim. Galus Mitzrayim was a catharsis, was an inyan necessary, not to sift through and to clarify the bodies of Nishmas Yisrael, but the heads of Nishmas Yisrael. Now this is where we're going to see the introduction of the Eiruv Rav soon. The word Eiruv Rav equals B'Gemashra, the word Das. So we're going to see that the Eiruv Rav is part of this inyan of sifting through the heads of Nishmas Yisrael. But again, we're not there yet. Let's work it through. Tzrichim Gilgulim Rabim, let's think in the second line, second paragraph. Tzrichim Gilgulim Rabim with Tzarfim Ulavnam Atayim Chalesim Hem. It takes a lot of inyanim to work through until all the sickness is removed from these neshamas. I did the Gilgulim Rabim. And these neshamas made their way into the world from generation to generation. They weren't just like now floating out of space somewhere. They became people throughout the generations, and every generation there was a possibility of them being fixed or being even further damaged. But the heads of the neshamas really did not really begin to really be fixed until Yaakov Avinu comes. Shetikin is Adam Rishon, who he himself was sort of the re-emergence of Adam Rishon himself. We know Chazal say, Yaakov Avinu is law he made. Yaakov Avinu never died. So on some level, and the Chazal say that his face looked like Adam Rishon. So Yaakov Avinu is somehow sort of the re-emergence of Adam Rishon. And now you could begin in earnest fixing the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, from Yaakov and on. Ishtam, also. Mitas these things. V'gam oz hischal tikun banov. And now you can really begin to be in the children of Adam and Chava, and Neshamas Hanisker, which were the Neshamas that we're talking about. V'misbarim v'holchim b'Golos Mitzrayim, ad sheyatzu Mitzrayim. And that's what Golos Mitzrayim was about, was really not for the bodies. The bodies didn't need Golos Mitzrayim. It's the heads that needed Golos Mitzrayim. That's what he says. Okay, so now that's the Hakdama, introduction. Now let's begin to see the actual history of these heads of Nishmas Yisrael. Because that's now what we're focused on. The heads of Nishmas Yisrael, what is their spiritual history? So they first come into the world in a damaged way by Adam and Chava during those 130 years. And now what? So what's the first time they actually come as people? What's their first Gilgul in that way? With the opportunity of fixing. Said there is Avina, Hascholas Gilgulam, the beginning of their Gilgul, of their Gilgulam, the first time where they actually come to the world physically, the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, Hayu B'dar HaMabel. It was the Dar HaMabel. The Dar HaMabel was not just bad people, and Hashem punished them. Mixed up within that generation were the heads of Nishmas Yisrael. Even Moshe Rabbeinu himself, Chazal say, Nechulin, Moshe Menatar Minai. It's a strange question. Where is Moshe hinted to in Chumash? Where's the first time? Where's the first appearance of Moshe? So Chazal say it's by the Mabel. It says in Pasuk, Hashem says, I want to destroy humanity. B'shagam hu basar, because they're just flesh anyway. B'shagam, says the Gemara, is b'gematria Moshe. Moshe, what's Moshe doing in Dar HaMabel? The answer is because, again, Moshe Rabbeinu is the head. He's leading Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. We're going to see Moshe Rabbeinu's relationship in this Indian soon. But the entire Nishmas, the heads of Nishmas Yisrael were mixed in the Dar HaMabel. They were mixed in the Dar HaMabel. So he says, and therefore the first opportunity they had to fix themselves was also the Dar HaMabel. But instead of fixing themselves, they damaged themselves even more. And because their original problem, they were born in the world, in the way of Aveira, in the way of Pagam, specifically with Pagam Abris. Therefore, that they came to the world with, they carried that baggage with them in their first lifetime, and they were naturally inclined to rebel against the Rebbeinu Shalom. And in what particular way was Dar HaMabel specifically terrible in? Where did they get this Indian from? It's because that's how they came to the world originally, with Adam and Chava, those 130 years, in the way of Pekam Abris. Side. And all this is hinted to in the Pasuk. When Hashem decides to bring the Mabel, he says, Vayinachem Hashem. Hashem regrets, Ki asa es ha'adam ba'aretz, that he made Adam in the world. Now the Mefarshim, yes, it's a little bit strange. We're way past Adam. We're talking about a generation of the Mabel. Why is the generation of the Mabel called Adam? They should be called B'nai Adam, I don't know, Adam. So he says, Haner B'dar HaMabel, that's talking about the Mabel. Kiheim B'nai Adam Rishon Atzma. Because really the problem started because of Adam. That's really the problem. It was Adam's decision. Gam Zeh Omer, this is also the meaning of the Pasuk. V'yomer Hashem, Hashem says, Emcha es ha'adam asher barasi. I am going to erase the Adam that I created. So the question is again, why are you referring to an entire generation as Adam? And you created them? You created Adam, right? Directly. You didn't create them. These are generations that produce themselves, right? In a normal way. Lirma is no. No, this is Adam. This is Adam. The whole Indian Dar HaMabel is going back to Adam. Adam was mamish created by Hashem, and this is just the re-emergence of aspects of Adam himself. So the first opportunity they had to come to the world is Dar HaMabel. They don't fix themselves, Adarabah, but they just intensify the problem. Achakach. Next, this Galgalu Pam Beis, B'dar HaFlaga.
They didn't die because of Gneva Gzel.
So we're going to see about Gezel also. We're going to see about Gezel also. We're going to see that soon. Those are the two affairs. Right now he's focusing on the Gama Bris, but we're going to see the Gezel soon. Achakach Nes Galgalu Pam Beis, then they come back the second time, B'dar HaFlaga, the generation of the dispersion. V'gam Heim Hiru Kavaisam, and they also, instead of fixing, they now mess up again. Achloi Bashchas Zera, but their aver was not Pagam Bris now in the second lifetime. What was there in the second lifetime? fear, a lack of emunah, right? They want to fight against Hashem. That's it. Inyoni emunah. That's their inyan. V'zeh shamar kosav. That's the meaning of the pasuk. Vayered Hashem. Also by that flood we find the interesting thing. Vayered Hashem liris esir v'samigdal asher banu b'nei adam. B'nei adam. Asher banu ha'am. Asher banu whatever. Asher banu. It's not asher banu. Asher banu b'nei ha'adam. But Dar HaMabul are called Adam. The Dar HaFlug are called B'nei Adam. Right? It's to hint to this idea. Because the second time, the re-emergence of Adam. And now the Pagam is with Amunah. This is, by the way, why you see in the Chassidish Sfarim very much that Amunah and Shmir Sabris bound to each other. When a person has difficulties in Amunah, more often than not, you mechazer yourself with Amunah, it's true, but also work on Shmir Sabris. What do they have to do with it? We don't yet know what they have to do with each other, but we are seeing that what neshamas that came to the world in the way of Pagama Bris, the two inyanim they struggle with is Pagama Bris, obviously, and the Munah. So again, we don't know why these things are connected. This is just introduction so far, but somehow these two things are bound to each other. Okay. And then there's a third time the neshamas come to the world, Ba'an Shei Sodom, in the generation of Sodom.
Each time for Tikkun, and then didn't have that Tikkun, and so each time they re-emerge.
Every time they re-emerge in a way of damage. The Derech Klal, this is something we find in the Shar Gugulim, that if a neshama comes to, again, I'm not trying to freak anyone out, but the way it works is that if neshamas come to the world with Gugulim and there's no progress, there's just no progress, then B'derech Klal, you got 4 chances. And if at 4 times there's no progress, then the Rebbeinu Shalom has to go other Mahalchim to fix, which could be Barachamim or not, but just other Mahalchim besides Gilgulim. You have 4 chances. If progress is being made, okay, then the Rebbeinu Shalom has all the patience in the world. But you have to show progress within 4 times. So first time around, no progress. Second time, no progress. Achagach Nizgalgu Plam Shlishis, they come back a 3rd time, Ba'an Shei Sodom. No progress, right? Fine. After 3 chances and still nothing's happening. The 4th time these neshamas, the heads, come to the world, they come to the world in Mitzrayim, and they find themselves being reincarnated in the Jewish people that are living in Mitzrayim, who are purified, healthy bodies of the souls, and now they're being reunified with their heads. And the Golus Mitzrayim is to work through the heads of Klal Yisrael, and that's what Golus Mitzrayim was about. Now, he says like this: and this is going to be the way to answer the question that all the Gedolim have dealt with. Tam Golus Mitzrayim. What is the purpose of Golus Mitzrayim? What was it there for? Lama Haya Golus Ahu. First, why was there a Golus? Why is it Dafka Mitzrayim more than any other place? Another question you could ask is, why Dafka in that way of slavery? So the answer is as follows, based on what we said. That these neshamas, the heads of Nishmas Yisrael again, that have been going through their Gilgulim. In other words, again, let's keep in mind, there's 2 tracks going on. The bodies of Nishmas Yisrael have been worked through very simply and nicely. They've had sort of a smoother mahalach. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Shvatim. Okay, Shvatim have their inyanim, it's fine, whatever it is, but Lamaisa, everything's pretty much fine. All in all, everything's in order. And Klal Yisrael find their way in Mitzrayim, and fine. That's all the bodies of Nishmas Yisrael. Mitzat Sheni, the camera now tilts to the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, a much harder inyan. The Dar HaMabul, Dar HaFlug, Sodom. And now they have to find their 4th opportunity to be masakin themselves. And so what happens now is the Rebbeinu Shalom decides to take those neshamas and to reunite them with their bodies that have now been just casually living in Mitzrayim under very pleasant conditions. And all of a sudden, when it's time for those heads of neshamas to reunite with their bodies, and now the bodies also have to take up the responsibility of working through the head as well. So then all of a sudden, Golus Mitzrayim begins and things begin to get terrible. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, why is everything turning over on its head? Why is Pari not remembering Yosef Tzadik? Why is everything falling apart? The answer is because at that moment, the Rebbeinu Shalom decided to take those neshamas and to reimplant them in Nishmas Yisrael. And now Nishmas Yisrael is complete and whole. You got to work through the Inyan now. And now it's a fourth final opportunity to make some progress, and Baruch Hashem, progress was made. That's what Golus Mitzrayim was about. Now he's going to explain exactly why the Shibud is, and we have to go a little bit further back in history to appreciate why Dafke in Mitzrayim, but we'll see in a second, just bear with me. So he says like this, V'lachem. Now he explains, based on the history of these neshamas, why the Golus Mitzrayim was the way it was. V'lachem. The 3 lines before the end of the paragraph. So now you have to appreciate what's going on over here. Now there's the avodah that Klal Yisrael has to do in Mitzrayim is now quadrupled. On the one hand, you have to fix these neshama, the heads of the neshamas, from the beginning. As you know, that was always the plan, to fix these neshamas. But now, not only fix the original problem of Adam and Chava, now you have to fix the Dar Mabels, because they added problems. The Dar Haflaga, the Dar Sadaim, they added problems. So now you have to not only fix the original problem, you got to fix all the added problems that came over time. And the Rizal explains that the experiences that Klal Yisrael had in Mitzrayim was custom made to be mechaper and be misakin those inyanim that these neshamas have been going through. Therefore, he says, "Lachein lafisha betchila bedar."
I had a question.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it could be
We'll
answered.
see.
The avos themselves,
Yeah.
were they on an individual basis fixing both body and head?
So they certainly were involved in that process, but in term that's why Avram Avinu, like he davens for Sodom. There's a reason why he's davens for Sodom, because he sees in Sodom the higher part of Nishmas Yisrael, and so he has big rachmanis on them. So, but their own
neshama,
in their own, them as individuals, they were complete. They were complete. But in terms of Am Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, that's where you need to work. Yeah. So because in the Dar Mabel, the damage that was even increased was through Pagama Bris, through Ashchas Hazera, and that's why they were destroyed with the waters of the flood, Mayim Roischim, which is boiling hot waters, which V'amevin Yavin, Chazal always associate that with Pagama Bris, right? That's why part of Shiva Mitzrayim, it was a terrible inyan, is the goal is that the baby boys are going to be thrown and drowned in the river, reflective, reminiscent of the Dar HaMabel. Okay? And that's why it was only on the boys, because Pagama Bris is a male inyan, predominantly, not so much a female inyan. So that aspect of Kol Ben Hayil Ur Tashlichu is custom made to be misakin the inyan of the Dar HaMabel. That's why it's Dafkas Charm. Ukeneged Mashichat with Dar HaFlaga, and the Veir of the Dar HaFlaga, which was what? Which was building structures and towers, the ear and the migdal. Havo Nivno Levenim, that the Lashon of the Pasuk was by the Dar HaFlaga, come, let's go and build and make bricks and build a tower to rebel against Hashem, to be kafir b'ikr. V'lachvar b'ikr li'lachim bay, to deny Hashem and to fight against Him. Lachin atin never been mekaymai, hava nischak malai. That's a paras as a language, same Lashon of hava. Hava nischak, let's come up with an answer how to enslave Klal Yisrael. Why that language of hava? It's reminiscent of the Dar HaFlaga. Hava nivno l'vneim, hava nischak malai. Because that's what the Shibud was, to be misakin, to be mechaper for the Pagam, that it's to be mechaper for the Pagam, and to do what generation was supposed to accomplish in Toiv in terms of the Dar HaFlaga. Okay? Therefore, live nice peace in Varam says, Kineged, it's a mistake, Kineged Eiruv Rav. So now, in terms of the Dar Anshe Sodom, he doesn't explain that, but we'll see in a moment. Now, he goes on to explain. Afal Pisha Kiblu Anshe B'Mitzrayim, therefore. Now, the Rizal says, sort of in brackets over here, the Rizal, it's an amazing thing. This is like, it changes Chumash, it changes the whole history of Klal Yisrael, and appreciate what's going on over here. Because we know, and on a very simple level, Golus Mitzrayim, it was necessary to allow Klal Yisrael to stand by Har Sinai, right? That's like Pasha. All the shmuzin you heard when you were from the Mashkichim and Yeshiva. What's Golus Mitzrayim about? To go to this Indian in order to stand by Har Sinai, Tavdin Selikim Harazeh. That's 100% true of Pneumius, but we appreciate this now because you can't be Makabal Torah unless you have the head of your Nisham. And that's what we're gonna see over here, that to receive Torah, which is Moshe Rabbeinu as an Indian, is that you can't. It's not enough to have the bodies of Nishmas Yisrael. You have to have the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, which explains why the Torah wasn't given to the others, and it wasn't given to the 70 souls. Like, why not? The answer is because at that time, in terms of Klal Yisrael, the heads of Nishmas Yisrael was not clarified yet. It was lost in Sodom and lost in who knows where. In order for the Torah to be received, the Torah has to be given not just to a body of a neshama, but to a head of a neshama. So you have to go through Mitzrayim. First of all, in Mitzrayim, that's where the head and the body became unified once again in the same person. And that's when that person now embraces the avodah that's necessary to work through the inyanim, that the head of that neshama needs to be worked through, and now you can receive the Torah. So it's all related to this. Now he says as follows: in order for this tikkun to take place, there's always the negative and the positive. So Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim are going through the negative; they're going through the kapara that's needed because of all the pagam. But what about the positive? What about actually fixing, as opposed to just getting punished for the mistakes? What about actually fixing the original issue? So the Rizal says like this: so throughout the Golus Mitzrayim, they accepted their punishment. But they have to now do something positive to Messiah. Tikkun, this is a big Indian, by the way, what the Rizal is revealing to us right now. Tikkun, when we think of fixing a mistake, half of it is sur meirav, is to not do the mistake again and to fast and to do tshuva and to cry. That's all the sur meirav. That's the einish, so to speak. But there's also that say toiv. That Indian now in positive.
That's the Rambam holds tshuva is only a time when you actually have the same position where you are.
The same position. Now you redo it in a positive way. But I'm saying in Asay Toiv to do it in a positive way. So how did Klal Yisrael? So in order to stand by our Sinai, we got to go through the inyanim of fixing these earlier generations. So the negative side of the fixing, the einish side of it, that was Golus Mitzrayim. But what about the positive side of it? So Rizal says the positive side of it. One second. The positive side of it is going to be experienced from Klal Yisrael's exodus from Mitzrayim until Har Sinai. So he says, one second. He says like this: V'alfa pisha kiblu anshim Mitzrayim matzich mekum v'asei. Okay, lachzer l'kaim hamitzvah sahem asher over lim lachin hochruchu l'saklim l'kaimam term nesinas atar bar Sinai. Right, that's what we have to do. The head has to be fixed. V'zanyan. This is the end. Hina keneged avoin dar haflaga. Let's go this way. Keneged the avera of the dar haflaga, which is shekafur beikar v'avdu avodah zara. So again, the einish shabai was the slavery, the building in Mitzrayim. But what about the positive? Lachin aslam b'mara Shabbos v'dinim shula. This is why they were given in the place of Mara. Again, in this Parshat B'Shalach, they were given the mitzvah of Shabbos. Right? The pasuk said they came to the place of Mara. That's when they were given a certain amount of mitzvahs. One of them being Shabbos. So the question for Hashem is, in a few days you go by Har Sinai. We have to have Shabbos first. So the reason you needed Shabbos because Shabbos is the positive of Kfirah. Right? Kfirah is to deny Hashem. What's the mitzvah that we have, which is all about Amunah? Shabbos. The Gemara says, whoever keeps Shabbos, even if you're a server of a Zara like Dor Enash, you're Meichel, right? Because Shabbos is about Amunah. So Klal Yisrael needed to stand by our sin. They had to fully rectify all those generations that preceded them, the Ramabel, Haflaga, and Sidon. So in terms of Haflaga, the einish of it was the slavery, and the positive of it was Shmir Shabbos. That's what he says. Right? Whereas the Haflaga, they're denying the existence of God or fighting against Him. Now, by keeping Shabbos, you're accepting Hashem's existence and embracing it, and you're happy with it. You're serving you want to have a munah. Shabar ha'olam b'sheshis me'brachos. You're saying that Hashem created the world in 6 days. V'yishbaz yom eshvi. U'keneged avayin dar ha'mabel. Now, what about the generation of the flood? So it's interesting. The Rizal says as follows. We'll see in a second. Like Mr. Klein pointed out before, is that the Dar HaMabel is composed of 2 averos. You have Pagam Bris, and you also have Gezel. So in terms of the Pagam Bris, the Rizal says the einish and the positive was all at the same time. Because when those babies, God forbid, were thrown into the river, so that's a punishment, but it's also a mitzvah to die al Kiddush Hashem. It's a positive thing in you. So that experience of Kol Ben Hayar Tashlichu was both the negative and the positive. What about the other side of Dar HaMabel, which is Gezel? So said the Rizal, U'keneged avoin Dar HaMabel ba'avoin Gezel, Nasan lahem Parshas Mishpatim. According to Chazal, that's what the Rizal is going with, is that Parshas Mishpatim, although it's recorded in Chumash after Matan Torah, but the truth is Parshas Mishpatim was actually given before Matan Torah. That's what the Rizal is going with. Shekol dina gezelu gneva nichtavim ba. V'loi oid. not only what is the Avera of Gezel talked about in Parshas Mishpatim, El Shadin Harishin, what's the first mitzvah in Parshas Mishpatim? Ki sekne eved ivri, that to buy a Jewish slave. What does it mean? Why is a guy being sold in slavery? Because he stole something and couldn't pay it back, right? That's the halacha. L'sakin avoin so he says medaber benimkar b'gnevasai. Aidei bezin. It's talking about a guy that stole something, couldn't pay it back. It's now being sold into slavery. V'lochin gam le'eved nimkar Yosef. V'chol b'nei Yisrael ha'yavad l'mitzrayim l'sakin avoin ha'gezel. Said the reason like this. Gezel also has to be fixed. So Gezel also needs an einish, and it needs a positive. It needs the einish of Gezel is the fact that Klal Yisrael are sold as slaves in Mitzrayim. So again, the actual building structures as a slave, that was for the Haflaga. The river, killing the babies in the river, that's because of the Ramabel. But the very fact that they're owned by Mitzrayim, whatever you want me to do, I can peel potatoes for you. The fact that I'm owned by you, that I'm an Eved, that's a tikkun, that was the einish for the Avera of Gezel of the Dar Hamad. Because what happens when you steal something and you can't pay it back? You're sold as an Eved. So, and this is also why, practically speaking, Yosef was sold, and the Shvatim have to pay it back. How do you pay that back? So you're sold into slavery. So that's the negative side of Gezel, and the positive side of Gezel is Parshas Mishpatim. You're to be Mekabel on yourself, to be Mekayim the mitzvahs of Gezel and Geneva and so on. That's the negative and the positive.
If Galus Mitzrayim was these tikkunim, then how does that explain we're at the 49th level of Tumah? Meaning, like, why, along with these tikkunim happening,
it seems to be getting worse.
More ready to do the asay type. Instead, it's that we're always still down at this 49th level.
It's true. We'll have to see about that. Another question I can't answer. No,
and they had Mila faces before they had Shabbos and
that's it.
So that was
his own Indian. That's his own Indian as well. But in terms of the tikkunim, this larger historical picture, that's what the result is saying over here.
But each pagam, on the second, third, or fourth, we added to that pagam, so our tikkun had to be even more than ever.
It sounds like more extreme. It was more extreme, right? Because the Dharmabal are not put into a massive slavery. Now you have to pay for it even more. Yeah.
Why so far, what happens?
So he says. So we took care of the Mabul positive and negative in terms of both Averis, Begama Bris, and Gezel. Right? Haflaga positive and negative is taken care of in terms of building structures for Parei and Shabbos. And what about Sedaim? So he says, "Neged anshe Sedaim shekafru b'dayonim." Sedaim also positive and negative. What was Aver Sedaim? Corrupt justice system, corrupt dinim. So negative, the result elsewhere explains. Negative is that part of the slavery was that you had these what are they called? These officers that were in charge of Yidden to make sure that the quotas kept and so on. Unhealthy leadership and dayanim and so on, authority figures that are negative. That was the einish side of the Dar Flaga, and the positive side of the Dar Flaga is preceding Matan Torah. Yisro shows up and gives Moshe the Eitzah of setting up a court system. Why is that the Hachana for Har Sinai? Because that's finishing. That's the positive side of Sedaim. So you went to the Mabul, Haflaga, and Sedaim. Each one needs a tikkun. In the experience of Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim and leading up to Har Sinai, both in negative and in positive. That's what the Arizal says. Now, until now we saw, we're going to end off in just a couple more minutes, and then next week we'll take it to the next level. Is that so far we have this Indian? Okay, so these Neshamas, the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, Mabul, Haflaga, Sedaim, and now finally they find their way in Mitzrayim, reuniting with their second halves with their bodies, and now the tikkun could really begin in earnest. And it's a big avodah, but that's what happens. The Rizal explains though that the truth is the heads of Nishmas Yisrael were in Mitzrayim anyway. They were in Mitzrayim anyway. It's not like they were floating, and then when Yidden were there, now they come in. They were in Mitzrayim anyway. And you'll see in a second. V'hin v'ata said the Rizal. This is in Parshas Miketz. So until now it was the Parshas Shemais. This is in Parshas Miketz. He's talking about what Chazal say, amazing thing. The Chazal say that part of when Yosef Tzadik became leader in Mitzrayim, One of his inyanim is that he made a gezerah on particular cities in Mitzrayim. They should have a bris milah. Go ahead. They should have a bris milah. And he rearranged the cities that people should live in particular places. So Rizal's talking about, what's this inyan that Yosef Tzaddik is giving a bris milah to Goyim? Why? Just time to make them pray. So on a very derech hapshat, the pshat is because he knows that Klal Yisrael are going to make their way to Mitzrayim at some point, and they shouldn't feel completely alien to the culture. So at least like the concept of bris milah, like at least the Goyim should get used to it. So derech hapshat. It's a little bit still funny. The Rizal says as follows: that after the Sodom, that was the third time, and now the fourth time they find that those neshamas, the heads of the neshamas, find themselves in Mitzrayim, right? So the Rizal said that eventually they become, they find their resting place and their final resting place in Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim. But even before Klal Yisrael made it there, they were in Mitzrayim, but they were mixed up amongst the Goyim of Mitzrayim. Said the Rizal. The fourth time, when the neshamas come, when they come to the world after Sodom, they first find themselves in Mitzrayim, amongst the Goyim of Mitzrayim. The Yada Yosef Ruach HaKodesh, Gehem Bechinas Nitzaitis HaNiskar Shabo De'ashchas HaZerah. And Yosef Tzaddik was Ruach HaKodesh, saw this in the Egyptians. He saw this. He saw in them Nishmas Yisrael, the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, and he knew with Ruach HaKodesh that this is the fourth time that these neshamas come to the world, and that means it's the last opportunity, and he was confident it's going to work its way through. And Yosef Tzaddik therefore knew that these neshamas are going to have to be mesuk, and they're going to have to be fixed by reuniting with Klal Yisrael. And this is why Yosef Tzaddik knew that he has to figure out a way to get Klal Yisrael into Mitzrayim. Why? Not because of the Shvatim, it's because of the neshamas that are mixed up in Mitzrayim, the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, that need to find their resting place in Yidden to really get the fourth opportunity off on the right foot. So what Yosef Tzaddik is doing throughout his entire time in Mitzrayim is paving the way. He's giving little tikkunim, little breadcrumbs to these neshamas of Klal Yisrael that are lost amongst the Mitzrayim, to give them the hachana that they needed, that when Klal Yisrael, the bodies of Nishmas Yisrael, would find themselves in Mitzrayim, the transition would be nice and smooth for these neshamas of the heads to be taken from the Mitzrayim and returned to Nishmas Yisrael and reunited with their body counterpart. In order for that transition to happen, Yosef Tzaddik is working his magic. He's working these inyanim. And part of the thing that he had to do was to give them a bris milah. The inyan of bris milah that he was given to the Egyptians was not to make them Yidden, but it was giving that lost head of Nishmas Yisrael in these particular Mitzrayim a little bit of a tam of Kedusha, that when Klal Yisrael comes to Mitzrayim, they'll have that, I tasted that once. I tasted what it means to be Kaddish and to be Tahar and to be connected to Nishmas Yisrael in a proper way, and they're going to be able to be drawn healthfully. This is what the Rizal says. Yosef Tzaddik knew when he saw the Mitzrayim, he saw many millions of them. He saw the lost heads of Nishmas Yisrael in its fourth incarnation. That's why he put upon them Mrs. Mila, to give a little bit of a tikkun of the original mistake, the original chait that these neshamas were born into the world with, which was what? All going back to Begam Bris. So Yosef Tzaddik is the first Jew in Mitzrayim, paving the way for the ultimate tikkun of these. This is where he started with last week. The entire inyan of Golus Mitzrayim is Begam Bris, tikkun Bris. It's all revolving around that. The entire inyan of Golus Mitzrayim is ultimately to fix the heads of Nishmas Yisrael, which came to the world in a way of Begam Bris. The whole thing is revolving around that. Yosef Tzaddik is therefore a major player to begin to create a path where these neshamas that are lost in Mitzrayim should find their resting place in Klal Yisrael is through bris milah. It's all revolving around this inyan. So he says, and now that these Goyim were given a bris milah, and the lost souls, the lost heads of the souls of Nishmas Yisrael that's in them, had a little taste of Kedusha through the Hiskashros with Yosef Tzaddik, Hischil Esakin Tzas, they can begin to find the shtickle tikkun, then Hisgalgalu B'dar Ha'acher B'bnei Yisrael, and now they become reincarnated or reconnected to Klal Yisrael that finds themselves in Mitzrayim in that next generation after the 70 souls. And that's when the Golus really begins. The reason why the Golus is happening is because that's the moment when the souls of the heads of Klal Yisrael that were now until now in Mitzrayim are now being siphoned away, are now being clarified, now being magnetically drawn to Klal Yisrael, where it's supposed to be. And now everything is set up for the tikkun to really happen in earnest, and that's when the Shiva begins. As the Rizal just explained, all the Shiva and all the Yom of the Ghost is custom made to fix all the mistakes that these neshamas experienced. So it's all about that. And by the way, this is what's amazing. How long was Golus Mitzrayim? 210 years, right? But if you think about it, the Geula really begins with the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu comes to the world, things are getting a lot better already. You can already see the light at the end of the tunnel. Moshe Rabbeinu was how old when the Geula took place? He was 80. What's 210 minus 80? 130, which means that really Golus Mitzrayim, in real dark Golus Mitzrayim, 130 years. Because that's exactly the amount of years that Adam and Chava had to become a bris inyanim after, separating from Chava. That's when these neshamas were originally brought to the world. So the catharsis of Golus Mitzrayim, to misakin that, is also going to be 130 years. And Moshe Rabbeinu's reemergence is now, just as after that, we're going to see this next week, B'ez Hashem, after 130 years, Adam and Chava reunite and have Sheis, right? They have a child after Cain Hevel, Sheis. Moshe Rabbeinu is the reemergence of Sheis. Moshe is Rosh Tevis, Moshe, Sheis, and Hevel. So Sheis is Moshe Rabbeinu, the Geula begins, and so on and so forth. L'sakim lavim u'tzarfim. So this is what's going on now. Getting back to the Eiruv Rav, very, very quickly. It's late. Okay, so mamish quickly. We're going to see that this process that Yosef HaTzadik begins, which is creating a channel, creating a path for the heads of Nishmas Yisrael that are amongst the Mitzrayim to find their way to Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim, for the most part, it worked nice and smooth. And when Klal Yisrael leaves Mitzrayim, the Jewish people leave Mitzrayim, they're going with the bodies of Klal Yisrael that they came in with, because that was never the issue, plus the vast majority of the heads of Klal Yisrael that they siphoned off, that they took from, that was lost in Mitzrayim. The Eiruv Rav were the last few holdouts. The last few holdouts of the heads of Nishmas Yisrael that for whatever reason were so shakua, were so mixed up in the klip of Mitzrayim that they couldn't find their way back to Nishmas Yisrael, even though they were given a bris milah with Yosef HaTzadik. And that's where the inyan between Moshe and the Rebbeinu Shalom is about with this Eiruv Rav. Because the Eiruv Rav, see, you have to understand, the neshamas that are most enmeshed are the most important, right? Because something that's very, very holy, that's exactly what the Yetzer Hara is going to try to chop very, very quickly, right? The people that, if you don't have a big neshama, the Yetzer Hara is not going to pay much attention to you. You know what I'm saying? If you're being paid attention to, it means you're on the top most wanted. So those neshamas of the Eiruv Rav that are still enmeshed, even after the whole Inyan, Yosef HaTzadik, Moshe the Makis, and they're still stuck in Mitzrayim. So on the one hand, you can make the argument they're not ready yet. So let's go for 3 days, like Moshe Rabbeinu says, right? Go for 3 days. We'll come back. What are you coming back for? Come back for the Eiruv Rav. So on the one hand, you make the argument they're not ready yet. But Moshe Rabbeinu says, I can't live without them. That's the essence. Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the reemergence, we'll see in a second. Moshe Rabbeinu is Das. Moshe Rabbeinu is the head of all heads. He can't leave without them. He can't leave without them. That's the name of the Eiruv Rav. So let's go back. We started with a question at the end of last week. Who are the Eiruv Rav? The higher echelon, millions of people. Well, once we're introduced to the more spiritual background of who the Eiruv Rav were, and we're seeing this process, this phenomenon of neshamas are lost amongst many, many people, but slowly but surely finding their way to the right place, like Yosef HaTzadik, right? He gives Mitzrayim a bris milah to create a path for those neshamas to move from Mitzrayim into Klal Yisrael. So you can make the simple argument, Eiluv Eiluv, they're looking climb. At some point, originally, before the slavery kicks in, and Pari is nervous about Am B'nai Yisrael, who is the Eiruv Rav, amongst whom are the heads of Nishmas Yisrael mixed up, amongst millions of foreigners, millions of people. But by the time the Avdus is already over, and Moshe Rabbeinu is standing before Pari, then at that point, the process has gone through to such an extent where the Nishmas Yisrael has now been gathered together and brought into the Jewish fold. And now all those millions of people, which before are now the Inyan of the Eiruv Rav, they're no longer the Eiruv Rav. They're no longer Das. They're no longer the heads of Klal Yisrael. And all that's left is what the Zohar says is the upper echelon, the few sorcerers that are left. So it's Eiluv D'Elukim Chaim. In terms of physical, is it millions of people or is it like 20 sorcerers? Like which one is it? But in terms of neshamas, Neshamas, it could be flexible. It starts off with neshamas that are mixed among millions, and by the time the geula happens, those neshamas are no longer in the millions of people. They're now just in 20 people left. And so in terms of neshamas, that's how it works. It's el velo tilukim b'chaim. But al kaponim, this is again, it's not practical yet. We're not up to actual Shovavim yet. You understand? But this is already, we're beginning to see, just to create a puzzle piece. What we're beginning to see is that really the inyan of Shmir Sabris and Tikkun Abris and all that inyan, which is connected with Yitzias Mitzrayim and Galus Mitzrayim, is now, we can now identify it more succinctly and more clearly, is that it has to do with Das. It has to do with the head of Nishmas Yisrael. And real Shmir Sabris and real Tikkun Abris comes with becoming more conscious and becoming more united with not the body of your neshama, but with the head of your neshama. What that means and what that avodah looks like, that's B'ez Hashem, we'll see next week. But that's really what we're seeing over here, right? You understand so far? So Shmir Sabris is not about just hold yourself back, which of course you have to do. Is that a question? But on a much larger pneumistic scale, real Shmir Sabris comes with a much larger avodah, which is connecting to the head of your neshama, the das of your neshama. And that's where we're going to have to investigate more what that means practically, and invite to the history of the Eiruv Rav, what's been going on since then. And B'ez Hashem, we should be zeicher to see the